Yeah, but when we're talking about 500 of it, yeah. Okay, now I'm gonna thank you for helping me get there. I would like to call to order the Thursday, August 12th, special school board meeting at 5:33 PM. Oh, it's the 11th, excuse me. Ms. Marsan, would you please take roll?
Mrs. Barker,
Here.
Mrs. Bell,
Here.
Mr. Kuschert,
Here.
Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible. Okay, so we will begin tonight's special board meeting with citizen comments. And Ms. McCabe, we do have comments, so if you would please read the notice.
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker, to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Ms. Gupta.
Hi, everyone. I'm Namisha Gupta. I am mother of 2 kids, 2 sons who attend D303, and I'm a single parent and a pediatrician by profession. I'm here today because my kids live with both parents as per court order, and I'm requesting D303 to do the transportation from both addresses. And I am having hard time requesting this year only. It was going on for last 3-4 years since 2018, never an issue. Now they are telling me that it cannot be done. And it is very difficult for me to understand why, because court thinks that this is in the best interest of the kids to live with both parents equally. We both have equal legal and physical custody. The school district does not provide me the alternate option to put 2 addresses. So I can only put 1 address there. And now they are telling me that bus will go only that address. This year they have approved the request for my older son, but going forward, I was told it will not happen. My other kid is in 4th grade and he will be in the district for next 7-8 years. So I would like to request all of you to come up with a policy for transportation for single parent families if they both live in the jurisdiction of D303 and attend school.
Thank you very much for that comment. Okay, now we will be moving to item 3A, which is for discussion, strategic plan, next steps. Dr. Gordon.
Thank you so much, board. Good evening. We have a number of guests with us tonight. We have cabinet members with us tonight, all here tonight to really talk about our next steps in our strategic plan. The work that has gone on prior to my time here, which we'll be highlighting, and then the work that the district has done around a portrait of a graduate. After that, we're going to jump into work around values, the values of the district, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later on, where the board will work collaboratively to develop 3 overarching values that will drive the strategic plan. When I work with strategic plans, I really like to work from the inside out. And those values are one of the most foundational aspects a strategic plan really needs to lean into. So I'm excited about the evening and excited about the conversations that we will be getting into. Our outcomes tonight, we're going to understand the data from that HYA collected, which will help us help inform the portrait of a graduate. We're going to learn about the portrait of a graduate tonight. We're going to have the values and the importance of the organizational values. Why values? Why is it so important? And then ultimately the big work tonight is creating a draft of the D303 values. That's where we're hoping to get to this evening. So with that, we're going to jump. I'm supposed to be clicking. Doing all kinds of things here. Barely focus on one thing. So tonight we have some guests with us, Rich Nogel and Dr. Jim Gay from HYA, and they've been with the board a number of times through the superintendent hiring process, and then they were engaged around the strategic plan process itself. And they've been instrumental in helping us develop the portrait of a graduate. So I'm going to hand it off to the 2 of them. Not sure who wants to take lead. But I'm also going to bring over the mighty clicker.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Gordon and board and everyone for allowing us to come here to share a little bit about what we've done so far. And I do this correctly. I did. In the whole process, there's 3 phases: the engagement phase, the focus phase, and then obviously the execution phase, which Dr. Gordon talked about. I'm going to cover very briefly the engagement phase. Mr. Nogel will go over the focus, and I think, and Dr. Igo will take the next step. So in the first phase I want to say it's almost like every phase is very important. It is, but the engagement phase is so important to get the data, get the feeling from the community, from the district, from the people who live and love District 303. And that took quite some time. And what we did during that phase, we reached out to quite a few people. We went out, we talked to the superintendent, the individual board members were interviewed by Rick, cabinet members, key community members. And let me say that at every level, groups with parents, administrators, teachers, students, it was fun talking to students. It was clear the love and respect they have for the District 303 at St. Charles. It's clear there are some changes they want. That's normal. That's good. That's healthy. But they were very respectful, very honest, very open throughout the whole process. We did many focus groups where we had, unfortunately, we did a lot of Zooming at that time, and it was the way of the land at that time. And we met with quite a few groups. That's where we met with parents from different schools, the staff, students. And we had the same questions. It was very important. The same questions were asked for all the groups. So we got some data that was then shared into the focus stage. We did a community survey, and over 858 respondents for the community survey. We had 463 parents, 275 teachers, 11 support staff, 51 operational office staff, 31 administrators, students, and 20 taxpayers who do not have students currently in the school. That's a great number. That's a really great number. We also had over 100 stakeholders that were part of focus groups and 61 interviews. So a lot of data was gathered. But that's really important. I know it takes time and you may think, oh, why do you know that? But you get a cross section of the community. And that's what you represent. The board members, that's what you represent. You represent the cross section of the community. And you want to hear their voices. And the one thing that Rick will, focus on over and over again is that it's real important in the focus stage, in the execution stage. I always say, remember the voices. Remember the voices of the focus groups. Remember the voices of the survey. Remember the voices of the interviews. Because it's easy to kind of fall in a trap and say, here's what we're going to do. But remember those voices. Remember what they said, what they shared. It's respectful to remember what they said and be part of the process. They were very grateful to be part of the process. They're grateful to the board to say, oh my gosh, thank you for asking my opinion. It was never, it's been a while and they loved it. They were really grateful for the board to do that. So from all this, I thought I'd bring, I'm an ex-history teacher, so I'll bring, from all that, we kind of came up with the major points. That's on, I don't know if you guys see the screen or is that a screen? All right, thank you. Very high tech here. And from the focus groups, the forums and the interviews, the aspirations of the graduates, this is what was constantly said over and over and over again. Some things won't surprise you, but again, they want to be kind, resilient, responsible, and curious, provide skills for students to be successful in whatever endeavor they choose. Came out clear. That was a clear statement, whatever endeavor they choose. We want to make sure students are going on to Harvard, military, trade, work, whatever, that they're all prepared for the post-secondary as they articulated through the many years. A foundation for all students to perform at the highest level, and that could change. They understood that, how that would work. Critical thinkers engage in respectful civil discourse. That came out clear in all different areas. Respectful civil discourse. Maybe it's the times that was going on a couple years ago. This is going on during COVID, and things were different. But they really wanted to make sure that the students learn how to respectfully have a conversation with one another, differ, but respectfully differ, and respect these other points of view. I thought that came from the students. Strong academic, social, and emotional foundation. And I'm not this board, and I know Rick talked to the board members. It's clear you guys have a passion in your heart for the social, emotional. Of all students. That came clear across students that as the times are changing, the social, emotional aspects in learning must take precedence. Because it can't be like this. The engagement data, which went out to the focus, that Rick is going to cover. And I can talk for hours. And I won't.
Some of you may remember our session back in March. I think I have seen some of you since then, but some of you not since we zoomed way back in March. So it's nice to see you in person. So,
oh, sorry.
So what did we do with all of this data? And that data was transmitted to the strategic planning committee that was formed by the district. The strategic planning committee was comprised of administrators, teachers, board members, some community members, and our first mission in our meetings in April was to transmit the data, explain the data, the survey results. We went through it all in detail so that the district could know what the community was saying, because the strategic plan process is not just one interest group, the administration of the board. It's a synthesis of the entire community. And that's what we try to do. We try to get our finger on the pulse of the community and transmit that data to the strategic plan committee back in our meetings in April and May. So then what did we do thereafter to develop this portrait of a graduate? So the next step was to try to synthesize the data along 4 topics. And those topics that have been developed over the years by HYA are, no surprise, academic skills, social emotional skills, but then some bigger picture items, what it takes to be a global citizen in today's community. And then what are the community's hopes and aspirations and dreams bigger picture items for its graduates. And so what we did is with the strategic plan committee, we held two rather lengthy meetings where we broke the strategic plan committee into working groups, 4 to 6 different working groups. And we had breakout sessions so that each working group studied the question, each of these 4 questions in 2 different sessions. And then each working group presented over here on a board their top 4 or 5 priorities for each question. And then we try to synthesize those and avoid duplication. And then we did the old fashioned, I think it's called dot dance. It wasn't very high tech, but we assigned blue dots and red dots and yellow dots, I think, for different point values and priorities. And then we came up with the priorities of the strategic plan group, consensus of what their priorities were for each of these 4 areas for the portrait of a graduate. And there was a surprising consensus on those topics. The first topic was academic skills. So what academic skills does the committee want to see in their students? And strong written and oral communication skills and reading comprehension came on top, which I think would be not very surprising goals for an academic district. Math and logic and strategies to engage in authentic, relevant learning opportunities were kind of the top vote getters for the academic skills that the committee identified and wanted to focus on in the portrait of a graduate.
Just one thing I want to reiterate though, when we didn't wordsmith this, these are their words. When they put it on the diagram, when they put them on the whiteboards, whatever, they wrote the word strong written oral communications or whatever. It was wordsmith later when you get the portrait of a graduate, but this is what they said, what they wanted, and then they were voting. It was real important again to see their voices. And then go back and say, this is, yeah, okay, Matt, I didn't get any, personal finance, got no votes, but it's up there. So I just want to make sure those are not our words, the words of the committee. Sorry.
Right, and those words were in part derived from the data and the
Correct.
surveys and such. Let's see if we can get- For social emotional skills, the top attributes were empathy and belonging, perseverance, risk-taking, and self-management were the top goals and factors that the district believes should be embodied in its graduates. For the hopes, aspirations, and dreams, by far the top winner was have the knowledge and skills that allow students to pursue their interests in order to positively impact our global community, which says a lot in a short sentence. So I think if you can achieve that, you've probably achieved your mission for District 303. And then I think that there was an identification that students have to be happy and healthy, productive members of the society. And I think that that's coming through with this post-COVID environment, and that not all work, no play. Try to have students who are engaged in interactive and social as well. So in confidence and to persist in view of failure and fulfillment. So those were the aspirational goals. And finally, we had the global citizen goals. And by far the winner was to explore diverse perspectives as active listeners, which is perhaps a losing art form in today's society. Engage in civil discourse, which I think is an important skill, and then have worldviews and intellectual flexibility, which all go hand in hand. Some of these concepts are interrelated and were hard to distinguish. So we did try to then, when we developed the portrait of a graduate, we did try to wordsmith it and combine some of these concepts into the portrait of a graduate, which I think will be unveiled now.
Kind of. So just following that, we had all of this information. And so as an administrative team, we really took that information and put it into themes and tried to think about what does that mean for kids and teachers? What is it we want them to actually be doing and giving to us kind of across time? And so all of the things that we kind of talked about We're done.
It's the next one.
There it is. All right. So what we tried to do is really think about how do we put those into themes and then turn that into what does that actually mean? And what are those behaviors or things that we want kids to be doing in our classrooms? And so we did that by really kind of taking some of the same ideas that we had in terms of those academic skills, those SEL skills, those global skills, pulling them all together to make kind of this idea. And we really kind of came up with big ideas kind of around an empathetic citizen.
Dr.
And-
Igo, we don't have this, correct? We-
No, you don't have that in your printed.
Oh, I
packet.
apologize.
It's technology.
Or soft copy either.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have one anywhere?
Oh, we can get it for you.
Okay, yeah, cause I looked at that and I started doing this.
Yeah, no.
But we don't
it
even
was-
have
it
it
was
in
a-
here either, right? Soft copy, no. Okay.
Okay. I don't know how to like scroll.
Dave, can you scroll it down?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we kind of did it in empathetic citizen, critical thinker, adaptive learner, effective communicator, and self-directed learner. So really the column that's on the far left really is all the information that we received across all areas, whether it was the focus groups, if it came in from the survey, tried to organize it, put it into themes, define it, and then say, what does that actually mean for kids and what they will or will not be doing, or what they will be doing to help make sure that we had a vision for where we wanted to go, right? Like we talk a lot about what does it mean for our kids? What does success look like? And this would allow us to really gather all of the information that people gave to us and really think about what does success look like? And it allows us to think about success not only from an academic lens, but also from an SEL lens. And to even think just a little bit further down the road of when we talk about having strong academic skills, what does that really mean for us? And it's really that ability, we call this out, the ability to build and apply literacy and numeracy skills. That's what we really want our students to be able to do and engage in real world learning and be able to make meaning from their work and talk across multiple perspectives and then be able to say, here's the connections. And now I have a new idea or a new thought right? Like that's the kind of things that we're hoping for and that we'll be able to see, as well as those SEL skills of having a sense of belonging and empathy kind of along the way. So we tried to kind of pull that together to give us kind of like the big vision of like, this is the ideal world for where we are. And then that allows us to really kind of ground ourselves in, okay, so that's what we're working towards. We all have kind of a common agreement that allows us to really put some cohesion to the work that we do every day. We start having conversations we have like a really strong definition of high quality instruction, but this would allow us to go back to that definition of high quality instruction and say, how does this definition get us to an empathetic citizen or a critical thinker or an effective communicator? Or as we're looking and thinking about curriculum and resources, does it have enough of the activities and learnings to engage kids to get us to this ultimate goal over here? So it really does kind of ground us and give us a sense of here's kind of what we're thinking, our big picture vision, and how are we building all of the things that we do in learning and teaching to kind of reach that overarching goal. Now, there's lots of ways we can come back and kind of measure that, but this is like that big picture. When a student kind of finishes with us, this is what they have accomplished. This is what they have done. The last time we talked about this, we had kind of talked about this idea of a portrait of a learner versus a portrait of a graduate. And the question was, why make a change or why think differently? And so honestly, we can do either or, but as I went back and really thought about where did the portrait of a learner come from, or why did we start to talk about it like that? It really came out of a couple of different things. One was this idea that we're an EC kind of 12+ system. And it's really sometimes hard to see a little guy, a 3 or 4-year-old, thinking in terms of that graduate. And these are the things that we want our kids to be doing each and every day, right? And we want this to be guiding all of our work. And sometimes that portrait of a grad can get kind of caught up at the high school level. And we really do want to really pull that down all the way through. And then when we think kind of around that idea of a sense of belonging and making sure everybody sees themselves, while it's a small number of students, there are some students that don't actually earn a high school diploma from us. Some of our students, like in our transition program, actually earn a certificate of completion. And so we want to make sure that those students also see themselves kind of in the work that we're doing. But again, that's a conversation to be had, and we can continue to work through, but that was kind of the thinking that led us from graduate to learner, but we can go from learner back to graduate.
Could you go back down so we could see? Yeah, that. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's in the. Okay.
So
We're trying to print it too. There you go.
I apologize.
No, that's mine. It was 100% me. So did we scroll down to where you were?
Did you get a chance to take a look?
We'll have that printed for you in a moment.
And then I don't know if you had, Dr. Gordon, if you want to do questions at this point in time?
Yeah, on the portrait of grad, portrait of learner, any questions, and recognizing you don't have the hard copy sitting in front of you. Just questions for Christine or myself or others around this portrait. All right.
It does reflect everything that HYI put forth. Like it has all of those components. I double checked it, maybe even triple checked.
Yeah. A lot of time and energy went into that.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts to that. I understand, I appreciate your explanation of the distinction between the portrait of a learner versus a graduate. Certainly, we want everyone who's associated with D303, whether it's for the duration of their education of, EC past 12, if they happen to walk away from 303, to carry certain elements of this forward. I think at the same time, thinking about the graduate as quote unquote, the final product of what we get. And an awful lot of students work through their graduation here. The idea of focusing on everything that a student has the potential to take away from their experience at D303 is encapsulated in that concept of the end product of the graduate. So I would strongly encourage us to think about that as what we owe the community. We owe them a set of graduates, whether the students participate in portions of the program or the entirety of the program, a view that every step that they take in that program is geared towards that end goal of a graduate that has a certain set of both emotional capacities and capabilities, but also skills. And so the concept of looking at the graduate as the end product really creates the opportunity for us to center on this is what the end product looks like. That gives us the opportunity to then walk back and say, in early childhood, what are the contributing factors that would lead to this outcome? And for the board, for this member of the board, the idea of the outcomes that we owe the community are encapsulated in the graduates. That is the final product. If we could take a snapshot of one student's progression from early childhood through graduation, we would want to see every one of the elements here embedded in that person's experience. And we'd want that person to walk away carrying that set of capabilities and abilities. And so I strongly believe that we have a galvanizing opportunity when we talk about the graduate. And it should be, even in the way that we construct curriculum, from that end goal that we push all the way back to early childhood.
Absolutely. Thank you.
On that note, I'm sorry, were you gonna? On that note, that's kind of very similar to the thinking I was having is ultimately it's the end product that when we're done with the student, when we have completed the work we've done with the student for 12 plus years, this is ultimately the set of competencies that we want that student to display this and other certainly attributes, other certain attributes as well. But these are the competencies, attributes that we like someone to have. Certainly not everyone is going to have every one of these attributes, but I think what we're saying is this is our ultimate goal. This is what we want to produce at the end of your time with us. So I do like the focus on this is what the end product is. I understand that, you know, and when we talk about, I know a student is not a product, but the learning is. And so, you know, if you're in the private sector, you don't buy the process, you buy the final product. And so I think we want to tell them what that final product in the ultimate sense would be.
I'm curious, where does all the work that was done by you and your team and this board in the past, where does that overlay into that, where we talked about the milestones for each of the?
Yeah, actually, that would be, I think, a conversation for us to continue to have. I think if we get through values tonight, then we start to talk about how do we want to measure, and then we can bring those back to the table and talk through, are these the right things or correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but that would be how we would, that would fit in underneath that.
Yeah, I see it fitting beautifully into the overall strategic plan. Exactly what Christine talked about is once we have the values, the learner profile, the next piece the board's going to engage in will be those 4 to 5 big overarching goals that the district wants to achieve. Where I would see then, so from an academic language, we would talk about those 4 to 5 big goals as kind of that summative assessment, that big assessment at the very end. This is what we want our students to be able to demonstrate as well. What we were talking about there are all those checkpoints along the way. So we have those ability to monitor the progress to be able to achieve the 4 to 5 really big goals around academics, belonging, whatever those 4 to 5 goals are. So I see it as a really nice blending into the process of the overall strategic plan.
Just because I believe and a chance to evaluate whether those are the right ones or if we need to make some changes or.
But those checkpoints, there's likely work that needs to be done to even accomplish those checkpoints.
Absolutely. And
Oh,
I think
for
the
sure.
work starts with the big 4 to 5 overarching ones to ensure they align, because we don't want checkpoints that don't align to the larger 4 to 5 overarching ones. But you know, I would assume most of those were around academic aspects. And we would be able to see where those fit along the way as checkpoints or formative assessments in order for us to reach the bigger goals of the organization.
So could I ask, so I think one of the hard parts of this as a learning organization is that we are a complex organization, and you can't take a 3-year-old and says, this is what a 3-year-old looks like. And you can't take an 8-year-old and says, but we have some parameters, we have some guidelines. I personally like both terms, learner and graduate. And I see that what we did in the past was, and I could be wrong, but I think was more, let's throw a dart at the wall. We know we don't like those math scores, so let's make a target that we can go for. I think what this is the foundation of deeper talk. So if we're going to talk about an empathetic citizen, as a board and as a community, we've heard from the community now. We've had some say in what this is. So what does that mean? And what does that mean in terms of academic achievement as well as building the human part of a student? Because we're about learning. We're not about just being done. And I guess that's where I would like to keep both words, because I think there is a place for an end. When you finish here, this is the kind of person and learning experience we want you to have had, but not everybody's going to leave at the same time. And not everybody's going to have the same exact ending place, but this is where we're headed. And I like the idea of having a learner piece because I thought you were very articulate about it, Mr. Lackner. But I'm not sure that everybody will understand that it takes time to get to that end point. So when we say learner, if you leave us in third grade and you go somewhere else, we can say that what we did to the point of third grade was heading you in this direction. And it also says high school, we're not going to wait till they get to high school. This is a unit district. So I would encourage us to use both. And I would also encourage us not to worry. And I know you're not worried about it, but that we're starting kind of new. So setting those targets, we may have to come back and figure out how to set better targets.
Very possible. And at least for me, I'm very open to that. I am just very cognizant. I do not want to see get lost the tangible accomplishments that our students have the opportunity to leave the district with, in addition to these items. So for me, if we use empathetic citizen as an example, I would hope that there would be tangible things that we could tie to at various grade levels that shows how they're getting there. And it's the easiest example, I think, which is why it comes up all the time related to math. Our math performance is not great. And we know that we have work to do to better prepare our eighth graders to progress and be successful towards the end, if they have determined that college readiness is their goal, for example. So,
and taking that example just to be more concrete. So we had talked about at one point in time to have a target SAT score. And we wanted it in 4 years. That was a conversation we had. And it was like, you can't start in 4 years to get to that target.
right.
You have to start probably when they are 3. And you have to, and that's where I get concerned that we set a target without saying, this is a long progress for a student, and there's a lot of pieces to it to get there, so that it isn't an 8th grade issue. It really starts in 3rd grade. And there's a reason why 3rd grade, you are doing what you're doing so we can get to a certain target.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No.
I agree with that. We are, I think, in a little bit of a conundrum because we have ongoing students, right? So we can't, in my view, we can't just disregard those that are in high school because, they receive something different in 3rd grade. So to me, that's the master problem to
Yeah.
solve.
So for, to kind of continue with my analogy of manufacturing process that you ultimately are buying that final product. I have no problem with Cadillac saying this is why this Cadillac is so much better than that Nissan, because this is what we do in each step of the process. Look at the quality. I don't have a problem with us identifying what we do along the way. In fact, you and I have talked about that many times in the past, that we're well aware that you're not going to solve any of these issues starting with somebody as a freshman in high school. We have to start. I think 3rd grade was kind of where we landed. So I'm well aware of that, and I'm well aware and in agreement that to identify those skills, but ultimately the product that we want to produce for each student is, you are going to have this set of skills. You're going to achieve them at different times, and every student is going to achieve them at different times as well. A lot of the academic ones are kind of measured out, but some of the other goals are going to be achieved. Some of those, the empathetic type things like that, those are going to be achieved at wildly different times for kids. But ultimately, if we're saying this is what we want a graduate to look like, this is what we want our product to be, somebody who has this set of skills, these competencies, these abilities, this is, I think, kind of where we have to land. I'm not, there's a little bit of semantics here. and I understand that as well.
Okay.
But I think that ultimately we're saying we are a district that starts with a child now at the age of 3, and we take them all the way through age 18. And by the time you give us that child, I think the phrase has been used by people in the past, we give you your child and you're supposed to give them back to us educated. They want to know, what does that look like at the end?
I appreciate the conversation, but Mrs. Fairgrieve, I think you asked a really good question. One of it is, let's make sure that we recognize the work that's been done in the past. And we definitely will, but I think there's going to be further conversation about what that looks like. And this is pretty typical. When boards come together around strategic plans, oftentimes we want to go right to what are those goals? What are those things that we're going to do? But I'm telling you, the work that you're about ready to do, the values work, I'm telling you, any of the strategic plans that I've been a part of, if we don't get the value piece right, the rest fall apart. Because this is that, I don't know who has the clicker at this point. I'm like lost the clicker. Yeah. So can we go back, Dave, to the presentation? Thank you, sir. Yep. Why do values matter? An organization's value lay the foundation for what the organization cares about most. It provides a common purpose that each staff member should understand and work towards. It lays the foundation for what the organization cares about most. Your values. And what Rick and Jim really talked about, and I appreciate Rick really pushing on those pieces. Remember what all those comments were. And they were highlighted earlier for us. And really, it's the board's obligation to really think about the values of the organization as a whole. What holds us together? What keeps our foundation? As I said, I love working a strategic plan from the inside out, because I believe that those values continue to come back to us when we're talking about the mission, the vision, the promise of the district. When we're talking about those big overarching goals, we continue to come back to those values. As the board thinks about the organization overall, all aspects of it, from our transportation department to how we educate, to buildings and grounds, to how we engage our young people, how we engage our families, how we engage our community. The values really continue to represent who we are as an organization. And I love what this says is it's what we care about the most. How do we put that into play? So with that, this is now the board's time. All I'm going to do is continue to facilitate your conversation around the values. What I would ask each board member to do is talk about one value that you've selected in a little bit about the why behind that value. Why did that value really strike you as something that our district, D303, why that should be one of the foundational pieces that this organization cares about most? So this is board. All I'm going to do is keep asking you. I may ask you a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about that. Define that a little bit more for you. Ms. Marsan, myself, we're going to just be taking notes and jotting things down. Okay, so we'll get a little messy. My hope is that we're going to go around 7 times. We're going to have 7 exact matches. Just joking. We're not. We're going to have dialogue. You're going to have to push each other back and forth around what do we think and why, and ultimately create consensus amongst the board as to where you're at. And that's why I'm asking you to give a little bit of your why behind your choice. So I'm going to be quiet and literally board members just jump in.
I'll go ahead and start. One of the ones that I looked at quite a lot was achievement, and achievement is we've talked a lot at this table about excellence and moving from good to great, and excellence is a little bit more subjective than achievement is personal. And achievement allows any individual to say, this is where I might be today, and I can do something different tomorrow. And so it suggests progress in a direction. And so for me, helping everybody think about what he or she might achieve And for each person to walk away with the value that achievement itself has merit is a strong value for us to consider.
I had identified that one as well. Very similar thinking in terms of achievement can often be self-defined, and it really can be applied to every individual and demonstrates progress, results, so forth. So. Ms. Parker.
I just have, I have another one that. It's up. No, I was going to talk after Mr. Lackner, but then, do you want us to just talk about
Yeah.
achievement, or do you
No,
want us to talk about
no.
what?
We're taking the notes and
Okay.
then I'm gonna push you when
Okay.
we start hearing a little bit of consensus on different pieces.
Okay. I mean, I thought achievement, it was important as well, but the first one that really jumped out at me was financial stability, because without financial stability, we really can't do any of the things that we want to do for our students. The portrait of a graduate / learner is, you just put that piece of paper away. So for me, that was first and foremost, so that we can do those great things for students.
I had a nice conversation with Mr. Lackner the other day, and he kind of led me to think about this in two ways. One, what about value, what we value about students, and then what do we value about the organization? And so I did mine that way, and that means I got to do more. But achievement was for the student. I got stuck on excellence because for the same thing Mr. Lackner said, we talk a lot about excellence, but I don't. And I think he articulated it better than I can. I didn't feel that was really something I wanted to. I wanted that more in the organization. I want the organization to be the best organization it can be for learning. And in that means there's service, there's commitment, there's accountability. So excellence is an organization, but I want the student to also be, my real value is I want that student to be a lifelong learner. And so that means they have to achieve and they have to be able to learn. And then under that are other aspects. So I had achievement and in one place, but the excellence and service commitment in another place.
So can I just ask one clarifying question? Would a lifelong learner, would it live under achievement? Does that make sense?
The word achievement, we think of it as an end.
Mhm.
We've achieved it. And there are other values that probably for me weigh more than just coming to an end.
Mhm.
I can tell you that.
Well, I just wanted to connect because I think Mr. Lackner talked about that growth as well. So I
Right.
just wanted to, because one of the things that we'll do, we're not just gonna have 3 words that sit there. We're gonna define it.
Okay.
We're really going, so I'm trying to grab those words too underneath each of your values. So that's why I pushed a little bit more on that you see that achievement as being a little bit of that lifelong learner, the growth aspect.
If I can just jump in on that real quick, just on the one thing that, because I've looked at this and perseverance is kind of where lifelong learner comes in as well. So if we're looking for a term to attach to that was one that I had several, and I'm just kind of looking through here, and they're alphabetical, so it should be easy for me to find them, right? But I'm looking for the ones that I had thought about. And that perseverance, the lifelong learner kind of hopped in
And I have
as a
that
term
one.
for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, actually, I was just going to say the exact same word. I tried to look through these to see what might encompass other words within this list. And so achievement was one of my top as well, but perseverance kind of implies challenge, struggle, right? Tackling challenging things and moving past them, and encouraging all of our students to persevere through their educational experience. And that's the type of stuff that ultimately leads to success and excellence, right? voluntarily taking on that challenge, knowing it's going to be tough, knowing you're going to fall down and get back up. And I think that that is one of the most important values that we can teach students, is that the expectation is that you persevere. You're going to be stretched here. You're going to be challenged here. So let's get through that and you'll grow and succeed. So I think perseverance really embodies probably a half dozen, if not more, of these terms.
And I just to tag on, because I totally agree with you. I had curiosity and risk taking and resourcefulness all tied to perseverance, and that makes you a lifelong learner. Because
If I can jump back in again, because there's one of the things, achievement was one of the words, and maybe just because it's at the beginning, the alphabet was easier for me to find, but one of the things I liked about it is both measurable in an objective, external sense, but it's also measurable in a personal way. That for someone to, who struggles with, let's say, math, an achievement for them might not be the same as the academic achievement for somebody who's kind of a math whiz. So that's something that I like, the fact that we can have a measurable outcome that we can look at and we can say, the achievement was they reached this score on the SAT, ACT, but there are others who can look at that and say, I was able to do something I was unable to do before.
Ms. Bella?
I had similar approach that Mrs. McCabe had, in that I picked a whole bunch, but some of them sort of apply to the organization and some of them apply to the learners and students themselves. One of the terms, like you were saying with perseverance, I did pick that one. I feel there are values on here that can encompass other values, and perseverance for me is one of them. Through perseverance can come achievements. Through perseverance can come excellence, all sorts of ways. So I definitely like that one a lot. The other one is safety. And to me, that doesn't just mean security safety. It means the same way that if a student, we want them to feel belonging, we want them to feel safe at school. We want them to have a safe adult or safe group of friends or a safe setting. But bigger than that, for me, safety can include the, nuts and bolts terminology, but from the building and policies and procedures, but it also can mean belonging. Do you feel, about that you can come to school and so you can be safe and you belong, you're included? So for me, that was one of them, not just from the standard definition of it, but it's to me is similar to perseverance in the sense that it can have more than one meaning. I'm not tied to having that value in there, but that's sort of something that represents belonging in that way. And then also dignity, because when we were in the spring, when we were talking about Dr. Igo came to CAC and the book that you were talking about through the learning that we did, belonging through a sense of dignity, correct? Oh, yay, got the title. To me, that was a really, really interesting way to approach that concept instead of just diversity, equity, inclusion, which have become such key words lately, but it's bigger than that. And approaching it from the sense of dignity is not, it's a bigger term that can include a lot of meaning and a lot of variance with, is it belonging because you have, friends in class, or is it belonging because you feel accepted in that class? So that's another word for me that sort of encompasses a couple other things. So if I had to only pick three, it would probably be to include other little pieces with that, because it wouldn't be just about, that's more for the students, not just about
the organization. I would choose other values for the organization.
I really like the inclusion of this word dignity. And if we think about its, the flip side or the other side of the coin of dignity is respect. If dignity is being worthy of respect, respect is the recognition that each person has dignity. And so to me, those two things go right together. And it'd be interesting to see, when we talk about respect as one of the values, which I had on my list, because that's an outward expression of behavior towards another person, and dignity is recognizing that you as an individual have the worth or the self-worth that requires respect or merits respect, and everyone has that dignity. And so the recognition of those two concepts together, I think, is a powerful combination.
Can I clarify? So when I read what the organization cares most about, I'm thinking kind of overarching from our lens. And when I'm hearing some of this, we're really talking more about what I would expect to find in the portrait of a graduate learner, like perseverance. Obviously, that's in, and that's definitely accounted for in there. So I'm just trying to clarify, like, what values are we looking at? The big one.
The big overarching organization. That's because there's three. We really, based off of the research, it's really important to be really tight around three, potentially four, but they're the overall organization. It's how we work from, if it's accountability or achievement. Achievement will need to be looked at also from a fiscal side of things, from an operational side of things, not just a teaching learning piece. So we'll see those values throughout everything as the superintendent, as I work to have accountability throughout our organization, we're going to talk about achievement in all different areas. When we talk, if it were dignity, what does that dignity look like across our organization with our roughly 2,000 employees, 11,000, 500 students? So Jillian, you're right. It is organizational we want to look at.
Okay.
And maybe when you were speaking before and you talked about financial,
Yeah,
financial stability, you were talking about us as a board holding the district, keeping the district financially stable is what it seemed like. And I kind of had the same thought. Are we talking about values that we want to imbue on?
It shifts
within
my
our
focus.
students, or-
I just need to have that focus of like, where are we thinking? Because when we start talking about students as a learner, then I start to think differently than organizationally.
No, it's really good to push back up to the highest levels possible for the entire organization. When each of my cabinet members, so I think about it that way, not just Dr. Igo. These are not values just for the learning and teaching team. It is values for the entire organization. When John is working with his operations department, he will see these values come alive in his department, or Justin within the finance department. These values represent our organization. And I see how achievement, be it in learning and teaching, be it with our students, but I also see achievement and growth in every other aspect of this organization as well. So that's how I view it. And that's how I want us to really have those conversations about because the kids are at the heart of everything we do. That's where we'll start with those conversations, but it has to connect to every other, and why it was important to have our assistant superintendents here tonight to be able to really see how does that reflect within a human resource department? How does dignity, maybe I'm going for low hanging fruit there on that one, but on the human resource side of things, what does that dignity look like when we're having conversations with our employees and our staff, and when we're hiring people and we're trying to make sure that we have staff members who look like our students and sound like our students? What type of dignity does Marcy bring to the organization and to the hiring practices under that value? So hopefully, does that help? I can just keep talking to him. And sooner or later, it'll just make you like, okay, that's good enough.
I want to throw out, so if we're looking at in that realm, then I like vision. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that word. I like being, that we think about being a visionary for our district.
The piece that really strikes me as an organization is about service. And that we have a commitment because we are a service organization. And we need to be, we support our community, we support our kids, we support each other, we support teachers, we support staff. And so how do we do that as an organization? And in that action of service, we are modeling what we want our students and our community to also value. And so I don't know if that's, when I think of what most strategic plans have in terms of service isn't one of the top things, but I think people go into education to do good. And sometimes we can forget that because we're so structured that we have to achieve and we have to be excellent as teachers. We forget we have to sit back and we have to remember that these are people in front of us. As a board, we have to remember that we are about 3-year-olds and 21-year-olds, and just how do we support all of the different people. So service was one. It isn't connected to your vision, but that was one of the words that struck me.
Ms. Fairgrieve, we haven't, want to jump in? Want to make sure you have some airtime too.
I had kind of culled my list down to 4. I know it's not 3, but I had achievements, I had belonging, I had safety as well, and I had growth, which to me spoke to the vision a little bit, innovation. You can achieve, but not necessarily be innovative. And I would like us to be both.
One of the things that I'm hearing though is around achievement. I'm hearing a lot of consensus around achievement as one of those values, as we've kind of defined it broader than just students. So is there some consensus around that one?
I think so. Certainly for me.
Okay.
Another one I wanted to toss out there that I tagged was resourcefulness. And really, that's something we want our students to be resourceful. But as I looked at the word, I thought about over the years, different departments within the administration, that certainly we've been resourceful in some of the ways we've decided to pay for some things in order to, that have saved the district money. Within the finance department, we've shifted funds that were in resourceful ways in order to help, balance our finances. I think that's one that's maybe worthy of consideration. Don't know how others feel, but so when I had called it down, it was achievement, perseverance, and I was kind of vacillating on the others, but resourcefulness is kind of where I landed for my third.
I think it is in some ways self-evident, but Mrs. McKay will also often say that this is a learning organization. And so for me, one of the words that I had on my list was learning, and in part because what we want are outcomes that are learning oriented, and we want lifelong learners. We've heard that today. We want that also in the organization. I probably find that word a little more attractive than words like innovation. Because there are lots of ways to learn other than experimentation, and experimentation is expensive and sometimes, fraught with missteps. And so often, in fact, and so for me, the idea of being a learning organization is really important. There are a lot of resources in the world from which we can take a lesson. And some of those are encapsulated within the room, some encapsulated within the district, others out in the ether. And so there's an awful lot of learning opportunities for everybody. And so to me, if we're about creating lifelong learners, and organizationally, shouldn't we have a value for learning?
That was kind of my tie with resourcefulness was I had that one tagged as well. I had knowledge and learning, but I thought that learning was kind of a better, kind of more encapsulated what we should be about as opposed to simple knowledge. So that's a good one in my mind as well.
I'd like to maybe go back because belonging has come up as
Mhm.
well. And I put belonging, dignity and well-being, and I think your definition, Mrs. Bell, about safety would go there, but I think we've seen it in the example from the focus group as well. I think that's a value that our community wants. They want their kids to feel like they belong. And as we all do as human beings, that community, we learned a lot through COVID that when we're isolated, it's not the greatest thing at all. We really have a community of learners, whether you're little or whether you are on your way to retirement. You're a community of people who deserve dignity and feel like they belong.
So I liked what Jillian mentioned regarding kind of the lens that we're looking through this for, whether it's, kind of at the head of the monster, so to speak, or all the way on down. And when I think about mission and vision and values, I mean, honestly, we could use dozens of these words, right? They're fantastic. There's a lot of things that we would want to see. But what I think about, again, mission, vision, and values, I think about what we want to cascade from the top down through every single person in this district or in any organization that you're developing mission, vision, and values from, which is, Paul and I have discussed this a lot. We have to start there to know where we're headed. So, and I think what we need to think of, similarly to what we were talking about with the portrait of a graduate, is what are the ultimate kind of end goals or overarching principles that we follow in order to get to that kind of end result. So that's why I still like perseverance, although what you said, Jillian, really made me think about it a little bit. Like, is that what we need to do at the top of an organization, or is that what we're hoping for the students to come out with? But I think actually they're kind of somewhat in the same, because when we develop strong values, we're hoping that everybody in this district or in the organization embodies those values. So anyway, again, I chose about a dozen of these words, but I'm trying to think of the words that can also, as I mentioned earlier, encompass a number of the other words that are on here. So I still think perseverance is one of those.
Still holding out hope.
Yeah, holding out hope.
Yeah, I like that. I want to just push a little bit on because there has been a couple on the belonging, dignity. From the organizational side of things. I just want to see if that is where the board wants to be.
I like the word belonging better for a school organization. I think dignity is a little bit much.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's included, they kind of string together, but I think it's really easy to understand what we mean by that.
I agree.
So the belonging, and then potentially within that definition around dignity is what.
I think dignity is kind of an important word. And it's one that is encapsulated in the individual. And so for an organization to have dignity as a standalone word is really challenging, because every individual has dignity, which is the worthiness of respect. What an organization can do is deliver respect. And so for me, the flip side of the coin is if what we value is people who behave with respect, they by definition recognize other individuals' dignity. So to me, the idea of belonging and respect go really well together, because we're all part of this together and we're all therefore going to respect one another. And that's a recognition, both in belonging and respect, of people's inherent dignity. And so to me, you can put all three of those together in one sentence because they belong together.
Wow, he'll be here all night. Man, you too. So hearing some around belonging, Just want to make sure that we're looking around the room. If that's it, that's number two.
See, for me, I think, I definitely like the word belonging, but I agree that respect embodies that, right? If we are respecting one another, that implies the civil discourse that they mentioned earlier when we're having to, disagreements or discussions with folks that we may not agree with, but the implied respect, meaning that they have, they belong here, they are valued, their opinion is valued. So I respect was my third choice. And I think, I don't know any organization that wouldn't really thrive if they have a respectful environment from top down. And so I think, and again, I think it embodies several of the different really strong words here. So not that I don't like belonging, I just think it fits well into respect. If we have to choose three, right?
That's what
That's the
pushing,
challenge, right?
Yeah, I'm actually, as I'm listening to this, and that's a very cogent point that if you're respected, you belong. And I think that, and so I think I would prefer respect there.
I'm just gonna
Oh,
push.
we got clean notes.
Oh, sorry.
I would just challenge, I think people can be respected and not feel included or belong. And I'm talking as an organization, whether you're a student or a teacher or, another member of the team somewhere in an organization. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that.
To me, I feel like belonging is a warmer, more
It's more inclusive.
yeah, and whereas respect is more, you can respect someone and feel respected, but a sense of belonging is a deeper connection.
I would agree
Yeah,
with that.
again, now I'm looking at like Ms. Barker was with
Yeah.
what you are, we looking at from up here or from within. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was going with that, is that I think that if you you respect someone's place in the organization, so, be that a superintendent down to a student in early childhood, that all are respected.
I also kind of think that belonging has a certain level of subjectivity to it. And I think respect is a little bit more of an objective term. And certainly at the top of the organization, if we're looking at that, if we're cultivating an environment of respect, right? Ideally, then you're going to have a number of these other things, these other variables involved in that organization. So, a sense of belonging may change from day to day or year to year, or I just think that respect is a more foundational phrase, a more foundational term. Personally.
To Mr. Lackner's, my point about dignity is, yeah, for me, I feel like that word encompasses the belonging and respect.
I actually want respect to me has more variance because how you show respect varies between cultures, how you were socialized and raised. Respect looks different from colleague to colleague, and it looks different from student to teacher, just I feel like there's a lot of variance with respect versus that belonging and inclusivity. You take into account those variances. So that I just want to throw my thinking out there.
I would agree with that because I myself have respected people, but you will never belong. I will never belong together with you. Belonging is, in my head, is saying more than just respect. It means we're going to interact with each other. I'm going to listen to you. I can respect you and not listen at all. I'll be quiet and polite. Or you can yell at me all you want and, I'm not going to be disrespectful. But if you're going to yell at me and you belong to me as a parent, I'm going to sit down and we're going to talk. And I'm going to work through that discourse in a respectful way, but it's because you belong to me and I belong to you. I think it's a powerful word. I think it's fairly new in education. And I think it's something that we're seeing in our community that people are striving to feel like a community together. And that's the belonging piece. So I'm less interested in the word respect in our big conversation. I expect that respect comes because people feel like they belong here.
I do think that I would like every student that participates in D303 to feel like they belong here. And that it is not only that they belong here, but that their school experience belongs to them. And it's a subtle difference, but certainly they belong here maybe because their parents put them on the bus in the morning and we look after them. But for them to feel like the school belongs to them and it's a part of them is an important value. So I do see that a precursor to that belonging is that sense of dignity and respect that's offered to people. And so I do think they go together. I have to say, you know, for me, this idea of the two-way belonging of students belong here, the faculty and staff belong here, that we're in this together is important. But there's that other view of that the school is here for each student. And when that student walks in, he or she feels like this is my school. I think that's an important thing for us to aspire to. So I could see it as one of the core values. I think when we talk about the students and how they feel and what they think about, there are a couple that we have yet to get to that I just want to throw out in combination and talk about my thinking around them. And one is ambition, the next is confidence, and the next is courage. And I put those three together because they maybe are ways that people can feel about themselves and say, because I have those feelings about myself, I'm willing to be courageous. I have the confidence to be courageous. And I have a little bit of ambition. I need to be resilient. And they're not the right ones for us to have in the top three, but this idea that particularly students would walk out of this building or the fleet of buildings with an experience that says, I now have some ambition and vision for my own life, but also the confidence and the courage to take on some challenges, recognizing that I would fail. Those are powerful concepts. And I think they're not universal. And they're not universal in the students when they come in, and they're not today when folks walk out, nor probably will they ever be. But wouldn't it be great if everybody walked out with some ambition and some confidence and some courage to go get what they wanted out of this world, and they felt like the world belonged to them as much as they belonged to it.
I'm gonna pause for a second because we're really close on belong. And I just want to wrap that up. But I love those three, and we're gonna come right back to that. So we're close. There's a little bit of push on the belonging. Anybody else wants to?
I'm just
Going
gonna-
once, going twice?
While Mr.
Belonging?
Lackner was talking, it's something that Mrs. Bell kind of she didn't have her mic on. She wasn't saying it to everybody, but I heard her say it, and it was a good point. She said ownership. That part of belonging is when you talked about the subtle difference between two, that she said ownership, and I said that kind of helps push me a little bit more toward that, to say I like the idea that yes, my education belongs to me. And that's when she said ownership. And I thought, well, that, as part of, I assume we're not simply going to throw some terms out there. We're going to be explaining what they mean and why. And I'd like that to be part of what we said. And I'd like to take credit for it myself.
I like that.
Well, I did give you the broken chair. The reason or the comment that I made, that the reason was because you were talking about the school. They feel like they belong at school and that the school belongs to them. And there are some statistics around achievement being directly tied to ownership and accountability, being more achievement or people reaching their goals more when they have more buy-in and they have more ownership. So that was just a really great point in the way you made that. So I agree, we should add ownership in some way.
Yeah, so I mean, I like the word belonging, but as we talk about this around the table, it strikes me we're talking quite a bit about like community, right? Creating an environment where everybody feels like they belong, right? And that would be again, encompassed within community, right? If this is your community, you belong. And so as we're going around and defining this, and I could be swayed either way, but it strikes me we're more discussing, establishing a strong community, which then has all of these things, a sense of belonging, respect, dignity, and so forth.
One more time around the horn. Belonging community.
And I like the idea that you belong here and your education belongs to you. I think there's that subtle difference that says, I've liked what Mr. Lackner said, so we can
Okay.
rewind and put
I- Or
Yeah,
we can just go for the consensus here.
I mean, I still like belonging. I think if everyone belongs, a community is the results. So that's where I would land.
Okay.
I think that when Mr. Kuchar said that, that's another salient point and I think that the belonging that, as part of community, as part of the actual bullet point can be, you belong to your school and your school belongs to you, or your education belongs to you. I like that. I think it, and frankly, it could probably go either way. But
I'm gonna say belonging. I actually like community a lot. I think it definitely needs to be part of the definition and part of it. We need to mention community. I just know that community could be confused. I think people will understand belonging better. And
Well, and there's a lot of communities. Right? There's a school community, there's our St. Charles community, there's your class, there's a lot.
I do like it though.
I like it. I do.
I feel like there's a consensus, maybe not 100% agreement around belonging. And then again, what we'll do is come back with some definitions for the board to work from that. So belonging, 6 out of 7. You're good? All right. We're down to 1. We're down to 1. Mr. Lackner, I want to give it back to you one more time around the confidence, the courage, the ambition piece, is where we left off.
Perseverance could go right in with that.
I feel like it sounds more to me like we're gonna climb a mountain. So I can't, yes, we are.
we
You're right.
are. That is what's happening.
I can't get those words smushed together into more of a one word that we have left. I don't know.
I like what you said. Those actually were not the words I had chosen. I had curiosity, risk-taking, perseverance, resourcefulness. I think perseverance goes along with the idea of having the confidence and that you're going to make mistakes. So you have to take risks. So you have to have the confidence and the support to make those mistakes and the courage. I really like courage.
I would go back to learning, if recognizing that we only have one left and recognizing the kind of the core of the mission. It says to me that achievement and belonging and learning, they're mutually reinforcing and not exactly exclusive, but getting close.
I obviously like perseverance. But learning was one of my other little, tagged off words here. And I do like the fact that it kind of, we need to say something that very clearly defines the mission of a school district. And I don't think any word more clearly defines the mission of a school district than learning.
So to be a wordsmither here, I would say learning goes as part of the introduction. We're a learning organization and therefore, this is what we value. It feels to me that learning is of course, that's what we do. That's our work. But to say that we're a learning organization means that we expect everybody's learning and that we are built on learning. And so I would say, in order to get another word, we could say that we are we believe we are a learning organization, which is defined and valued and da, 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 da.
And here's the cool thing. We still have to go back and really think about our current vision and mission. So the values you'll go back and you'll look at our current vision and mission. That will be one of our next steps as well. So we're not done wordsmithing, but these values will feed those pieces.
So Mrs. McCabe, if learning was not the third value, what would you put in?
Well, we've talked, I think we've got, what was our first word? I'm sorry.
Achievement.
Achievement. And belonging. And so then something along the idea that courage and confidence is pretty cool, but I don't know if that describes it enough, that we really want kids to come out of here as problem solvers, but that is too cliche, I think. That they've got the skills to see a problem, to be solution oriented, but that they've got the skills and the confidence to solve whatever they're looking at, whatever their vision is, whatever they want to be, that they come out feeling strong. I don't have any words. How's that?
All I do is push back that maybe the portrait of a graduate. So I'd keep pushing bigger organizational.
Mrs. McCabe, I liked when you said service. I think that that flows well all the way through, because we are in service, even that works for transportation as well as it works for, guidance counseling, like it works for all the organizations. So I liked when you said that.
Well, I like service as well.
I think much of what you said, I was kind of going back to, perseverance, but in resourcefulness again as well. That kind of sounds like what you're looking at there, what you're thinking about is, and that goes along with learning. I mean, we want someone to learn to be a thinker, and that when you're a thinker, you're going to be more resourceful. So.
Would we to flip that around then, would we describe ourselves as a service organization and then back to putting learning as one of the three values? I don't know.
When Mrs. Barker said that some of these terms, whatever term it was, could be confused, every one of these can be confused.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is, I think we've demonstrated that there are a lot of different interpretations for every one of these terms. And that's why I prefer using, more concrete terminology, because there is less confusion. So
How about order? I like things to be orderly. Real concrete.
but I'm giving you an order.
I think to me, learning is just obvious. That's what we're about. And I would thank you, Mrs. Parker, for remembering service. I think then the word excellence comes in. As an organization, we want to be the best for kids. And that means we're going to serve them well. We're going to serve each other well. We're going to make this a great place. You are going to want to be here. To me, just putting learning in is too obvious, because that's what we do.
Well, I think it would need to be expanded to a lifelong learner. That is different to me, being a lifelong learner versus just learning.
For lifelong learner, I think that would help encompass the entire organization, because we're encouraging consistent lifelong learning in the staff, as well as teachers, as well, everybody top to bottom. So if we have to use learning or learn, I think that would, to your point, would be the right way to do it because we want to look at the whole organization.
So like learning achievement, I mean, I think if learning's there, it might need to be the first word then. You know, and learning, achievement, belonging. Maybe not. I'm not saying a lot of great consensus.
As a value because it suggests how everyone across the organization can view what it is that they do. Even in our discussions about leadership, we can talk about service-oriented leadership versus directive-oriented leadership, and it has a lot of positive connotations. So I understand Mrs. McCabe's point about the obviousness of learning as a core value in D303. So if we're pushing on a third construct that would support learning, then service can operate at every level.
Mr. Kuchar, we haven't heard from you in a little bit.
I'm in deep thought over here in my own mind. Yeah, I actually, I like what Mrs. McCabe said regarding learning. And I also like your point there too, Joe. But I do think it is kind of implied in our organization, right? If we're not learning, then we're not doing our jobs. Although I like the term, I think it is kind of an understood thing. I keep coming back to perseverance because I can't think of any level of an organization where that isn't critically important, from the top to the cabinet and cascading all the way down. Without perseverance, you're not going to have achievement. I suppose it's not necessarily related directly to belonging, but I keep coming back to that. I can absolutely get behind service though, because I think service is kind of at the core of what every one of us is doing, right? We're serving the community. The folks that are on the board elected to be here or appointed are here to serve, right? You're here to serve. These folks are here to serve. And so I think I can definitely get behind that, but I'm kind of tied to perseverance right now.
Well, and I'm going to push a little bit on the concept of I like perseverance as well. But service, just like learning, kind of is what we do. And so I think, again, that's sort of implied that we are, as we said, a service organization. I think Mrs. Fairgrieve said that as well. We are a service organization that is whose primary goal is learning. So yeah, I'm still, for me, the two that I still like the most are perseverance and resourcefulness. Because I think resourcefulness is something that we're trying to instill in our students, and it's something that we want every level of the organization to be engaging in resourceful thinking so that they can accomplish what they need to.
With regards to service, how is it that you see the students? I see how organizationally, but how does service encompass students as well?
I mean, I can see it as a value, where if they're seeing a shift in adult thinking, I mean, if you think about servant leadership, about being there for each other and being, providing service back to their district and their community. I think that is a shift in thinking, rather than sometimes especially secondary gets very competitive. But if we begin to think about it as more as we're serving one another, we're serving our community, we're giving back, to our school. I think that begins to, I think there's more to it. I would have to sit down and think a little bit more about like how that actually plays out for students. It does in my mind, but to have a more cohesive thought there.
I mean, to your point, there are a lot of districts that, have a focus on service hours and things like that, especially at the secondary level. I mean, I can support service as our third value. No for Ed.
I'm still wavering, not because I don't agree that it's an important thing. It's, I think that along with learning, and it may be not quite as directly tied to what we do, but I think it's implicit. And I think I think if we're trying to put out values that are more than the implicit values, then I think that, again, I've already said the two that I'm kind of landing on myself, but I think if we're trying to do that, I think that we need to pick a term that is less implicit in the actual function of what we do.
I would definitely be in favor of perseverance over service. It's a little maybe in the definition or description in wordsmithing. I just feel like it doesn't, to me, it does not encompass all of the students. Because if you're talking about service hours, that's right. That's more like a high school thing. So how
I'm
does
definitely
that?
not thinking about service, like
Well,
definitely
no.
just service hours, but I'm thinking more about a
trying to think
shift
of-
in how if you bring it back to students, it's more of a mindset. So you might be on yearbook and that might be part of your service back to your school community. Where there's all sorts of ways that you can, provide service. As far as high school goes, but as far as
Right, but
little kids go.
elementary, or that's where I'm having trouble.
Well, service,
I mean,
Putting it-
elementary, it's, if you see you're in 4th or 5th grade and your teacher is struggling with something on technology, they might step up and assist their teacher. I agree, it's more of a mindset. It's a way of thinking, a way of carrying yourself, behavior.
Okay.
It's my background. This was what I was pounded in as a kid, that we have one shot at this thing. And it's about trying to make that shot the best so that when you leave, you've left a little better. And that to me is service. And so it isn't the hours you put in, but it's also about the relationship we have, or it's about how I ask a question to you versus telling you. I don't agree that all districts are service oriented. I think they have hierarchies and you can't do this unless you talk to me first. I think those kinds of cultures, I'm not saying D303 has that, but it happens in other. And so when we are going in with the mindset that I'm service oriented, so I'm gonna sit down with you and we're gonna, when we do morning meeting and kindergarten, we're learning about each other because that's part of that belonging and community as well. So I don't think it's implicit that service is part of a educational organization. It should be, but I don't believe that it's always set up that way. And I agree, it's mindset.
And I agree that they're not always set up that way. Quite frankly, I've encountered school districts that aren't set up for learning very well either. But I think that, like I say, I'm those two terms that I had mentioned, I think are both terms that are important for any organization. Perseverance, resourcefulness are important for any organization. That I know it's just my view. That's fine. I'm just, that's kind of where I'm landing. I'm giving my thoughts, but I think services is, I think they're more concrete terms as well. And again, I prefer more concrete terminology.
I agree. I am way more in favor of something like that than service. I get the concept and I get the feeling behind it. I just feel like there's a better way to say that. And even in a way, it sort of ties into belonging, like you said. So we're kind of, if we want them to be core values, they shouldn't be very similar to each other.
Don't feel like we have much consensus around service. I would say let's table service for right now. Is there another term? Is there another word? Is there another value that really resonates with people that we have not talked about? or one that we have. And there was going back to the courage, the confidence, going through my list.
There were a lot of people that talked about perseverance.
Mhm.
You know, when I think of what we're doing here, right? Determining our values, it gives rise to the culture of the organization, right? We want to have a culture of achievement, a culture of belonging, a culture of perseverance. Because those are, I mean, let's just even think of the last couple of years. I mean, there has been an insane amount of perseverance necessary to get through all of these challenges from the top of the organization all the way on down to each individual student who really had to persevere through some challenging times. And I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'm curious as to what, I mean, considering that this is something that everybody's going to embody, like what does the cabinet think? Do you have any thoughts about this? And I get it that this is kind of an exercise that we're all working on, but perhaps considering we're wanting everybody to get behind these values, I'd be interested to hear if there was any thoughts from the rest of the folks at the table so that I can stop talking about perseverance.
I'm just going to note
You're
that he's
persevering through that,
persevering on this.
Well done.
He's modeling it.
Excellent example.
Cabinet?
Didn't mean to put you on the spot, by the way.
I'm always wondering, should I be the first to talk?
Yes.
When I hear the word perseverance, I'm gonna fall with Matt in that I feel like it is something that is critically important to all that we do and the work that we, right? There's nobody in the organization that can't get the work done if they don't have a value in around perseverance.
So at the beginning, I was thinking perseverance could be tied to achievement, but I think the more that we talk about those specific challenges that we've had to face individually or as an organization, I mean, there is a distinct difference in what we're trying to achieve in our daily lives and then the challenges that can come about unexpectedly. And some of those are a little bit long lasting. Some of those are just blips on the radar and we have to just kind of knock them down as we get through them. So I like perseverance. I think we are faced with challenges a lot, but we just never know what those challenges may be. And having the skill and the value behind perseverance will help us hopefully get through those challenges when they arise, because they will arise.
I'm just going to continue the same debate that's been happening so far. Because I actually like service. To me, service to me is about being something, a part of something or contributing to something that's greater than yourself. And that I wasn't originally on board with service when it first came up. And then as I started to think about it, that it made a lot of sense to me with an organization like this, the word we want kids to want to be a part of something that's greater than themselves. And that's what really spoke to me about that.
I'm going to pop back in again. So two things that one that just kind of popped into my head as you were speaking, the initial response, and people are going to be looking this, people are not necessarily going to be perusing this, and we're looking at what their initial response is going to be. And I think a lot of people had a similar initial response to the term service, that it's a little bit nebulous. The other thing is just that when you talked about tying perseverance to achievement, that also spurred a thought with perseverance is different for everyone, just like achievement is different for everyone. That you can persevere for individual things as a student, individual, but when you're persevering within the organization to advance the organization, there's different things and different levels of ultimate achievement that you intend to garner from that perseverance. So I think that when we were talking about kind of having words that dovetail together, I think those two words dovetail together quite well as well.
So as you guys were talking, I heard a couple of different things around service and perseverance. And I was looking back at the other achievement and belonging and thinking, these are attributes and values that an individual kind of walks away with, whereas service is almost something you demand of them. And so they're almost different. And so when I hear the discussion that you guys have had around perseverance, that again, that seems to go with this idea. This is what you walk away with, this value and achievement and belonging. And then and perseverance has the additional lens. You can look through it and say, well, certainly we would value someone setting a goal and then achieving that goal and making progress and growth towards that goal. But when we add perseverance, we recognize that not everyone will achieve his or her goal, but we value the process to get to that goal, and perseverance reinforces that concept. So I do see them going together nicely. And this distinction between kind of what you get and what you're forced to give around service just struck me as something to consider. I'm still, I probably could go either way or go with either one, but it's just how I was thinking about them.
Aren't we, Dr. Gordon, aren't you just kind of hindering us from having perseverance and service? Because you're making us only have three.
Hinder's not one of our words.
Because perseverance is really important. And I'm sitting here chuckling because we've had a lot of people who have been in front of us persevering to get their point across for a long time. And so it's a value that I have, but so is service. And I do like what Justin said.
Perseverance, as you mentioned, brings the community in. It makes the community part of this.
But I think that perseverance though as well, when I was visiting the transition program yesterday, we were right here in this building, those young people persevering, their teachers, the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. But as I said earlier, I really like that courage piece. Within perseverance is a lot of courage because you've been knocked down generally. I mean, there's a connotation that perseverance is there's a struggle, and the academic struggle is a real thing too. And that's something that we want, that true way to get through that. But I think about it from our operation side of things. How do we continue to persevere through the work that we're trying to do of creating even better learning environments, the physical structure in the work and the constraints around some of the dollars, and how do we make sure that we're doing that and continuing to do it a little bit better each day? We may not have all the resources we need, but we have to persevere and continuing to do the right by our students and our community, and ensuring that our facilities are the best possible way. So when I continue to think about those values in a large organizational standpoint, I see that perseverance. I do see the in service of, I absolutely do. But if I were to stay with three, which were the rules of the game, that's where I would put my token if I were have to put it up on the board. Jim, Rick, anything from your vast experiences of doing this work?
I'd like to add that Jim started out the session by saying, listen to the voices, listen to the data, listen to the survey results, listen to all the work that's been done these past 6 months. And guess what was the number one social emotional skill that the Strategic Planning Committee came up with was belonging. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. Guess what number two was? Perseverance.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that is we're sitting back here, like listen to the voices, and as Dr. Gordon talked about, even the fortunate graduate/learner, it's a journey. You have to remember it's a journey from pre-K to graduation. So it's not, and anytime they're in that journey, kids are gonna have to persevere. They're gonna give service. And I think, and Mrs. McCabe, I think what you said not a long time ago, I should say that. You said no, clearly there's gonna be an opening statement, which is gonna encompass some of those things you wanted to say. But I would reiterate, listen to the voices. So when you come back and you share this to the public, they want to hear that they were heard. I feel a sense
You
of,
convinced me.
so that's just my thought.
Wow, perseverance by my friend over there in the checkered shirt. I want to go around the room though, or with the value of perseverance. Yeah. It's if he turned off his mic.
I don't like the word perseverance, but if it's just me, then I'm fine with it. The reason I don't like the word itself is that I feel like as far as for I like perseverance as far as the action goes, but I feel like it's more of an individual character trait as opposed to an overarching value. That's just what's in my brain.
I think it's good to share those. Others?
I'd like to add fun, no. Perseverance, it is an individual trait, but think about the district itself. We've persevered through, as a district, we've persevered through COVID. We've persevered through all the things that were associated with that. As a district, we as an institution have persevered. I'm really in favor of the word. It's
Ditto.
Others? We're good?
I'll just add one more quick thought. I just.
But
Yeah.
you won. I
I'm
don't know
not
what you're
lobbying for
doing.
it anymore. I'm done lobbying.
if
for
you
it, but-
change your word.
Yeah. Thank you.
Careful
Well,
here.
I'm going with fun now. No, but I think that it kind of flows nicely when you start with belonging, perseverance, achievement, right? It's almost like a stepwise mechanism.
Yeah.
So.
Of a learning service organization.
Okay, so these are the three for right now. But we'll bring these back to the board. We're gonna take all of Mrs. Marsan's incredible notes. And we're gonna pull from that the definition. It's gonna come from your words. And your statements around each one of these values. We'll bring that back. So this is not done. There's time it's always good to reflect on things and come back to them and see them a couple more times before we say, okay, this is where we're at. So our next steps will be staff time, pulling those pieces together, putting definitions to them, reviewing all of your comments, and then bringing them back to the full board for the next step. So for this portion of it, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Dr. Gordon. Okay, moving forward on the agenda. So can I have a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purposes of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms.
You're
Ball
ready.
and Ms. McCabe, first and second. Okay, Ms. Marsan, will you take roll call?
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kutscher,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-2.